Bon dia, welcome to Exploring Timor-Leste, the podcast that talks about Southeast Asia's best-kept travel secret. I'm your host Jonty, and I'll share first-hand insights, expert interviews and practical travel tips. Whether you're a traveller, a culture lover, or just curious about places rarely covered in the mainstream, you're in the right place. Let's explore Timor-Leste. Today's episode, I'm going to talk to you about the municipalities of Aileu and Ainaro. These are some of the more spectacular parts of Timor to explore. If you're looking at a map of Timor-Leste, Aileu and Ainaro are basically due south of Dili. So if you head out of Dili on the road to the south coast down to Manafehi, you're going to go through Aileu and Ainaro. So talk about each of them in turn, starting with Aileu, because that's the one that's closest. It's one of the smallest municipalities in terms of population, home to only 54,000 people, and it's one of only two landlocked municipalities. There are a number of historic and religious sites to visit in Aileu, along with local markets. In 1999, Aileu was briefly considered as a potential capital for Timor-Leste before they decided to keep it in Dili. In terms of things to see and do in Aileu, the first thing you'll come across is potentially the Beloi waterfall. This is a 35-minute drive south from if you head through the Comoro road rather than the Dowry road. There's kind of two roads that eventually join going from Dili into Aileu, and so the Comoro is at the west of Dili. So if you drive up from there, the road basically goes through the waterfall. You can't miss it, depending on the time of year and the amount of water coming from the falls. There'll either be a puddle to drive through or quite a large pool of water for your vehicle to navigate, and it's quite an impressive and sort of scenically located waterfall. The road continues up into the hills with some amazing views back down towards the coastline, and then you're going to get into Aileu, which is the name of the main town in the municipality. So on the outskirts of Aileu, as you come into it, is the Projeto Quinta Portugal, which was established in 2016 as an agricultural centre, which is aiming to improve food security in Timor-Leste. And so they grow around 450,000 trees, which have then been transported elsewhere in Timor-Leste, and you can do tours to see their coffee farming and explore the plantations. The town really is marked when you're heading into Aileu by the Tigra Pillar Monument, which is a 3-column red and white local landmark on the main road. You will then go past on your left Dili Vanilli, which are growers, buyers and sellers of 100% organic coffee, vanilla tea and spices, including turmeric, ginger, cinnamon and cloves, which were established in 2018. There's a shop on site which is well worth visiting, and there's also accommodation if you want to stay longer. When you come into Aileu, the centre, there is a roundabout, the Rotunda Aileu, and there's a figure on top of the roundabout that represents the Timorese breaking free of the chains of colonisation. Now, I'm assuming it's similar design to ones I've seen elsewhere in Timor-Leste, and which were all built during the Indonesian occupation. So it's ironic that the Indonesians, even though they were pretty brutal occupiers, they're the ones who put these statues about, I think it was the idea of Asians breaking free from the Portuguese colonisers. By the roundabout is a large formal park, and that's home to various symbolic structures. And there's one spot with some shade, and that's where they put the playground, and that opened in mid-2024. As I mentioned earlier, there are some large regional markets which are held there. Saturdays are probably the best day to visit, and that's where the bus stop is to other destinations. Just past the markets is the Aileu Massacre Monument. So on the 31st of August 1942, Aileu was invaded by the Timorese allies of the Japanese invaders, and 5 Portuguese soldiers and a number of civil servants and missions were killed. So the monument commemorates the massacres, and opposite the monument is an attractive colonial-style building from the Portuguese time, and there's a pair of statues representing Mane, men, and Feto, women, in local traditional clothing. A little bit out of town, you wouldn't drive past it, you have to drive to it. There's only a few minutes, but it's around the back. Is the Nicolau Lobato Monument. This is quite an impressive monument with a large bust of the head of the first Prime Minister of the Democratic Republic of East Timor. So his time in office and his life, unfortunately, was cut tragically short by the actions of the Indonesian government. So he only lasted, I think, 10 days in office as the Prime Minister before Indonesia invaded Timor. He then went into hiding, but he was captured and killed 3 years later by the Indonesians. So this memorial also honours 32 Timorese who helped him and other resistance leaders hide during the Indonesian occupation, and 137 veterans that were involved. He's also commemorated by Dili's airport being named after him and the presidential palace. As you head out of Aileu to the south, it's worth taking a quick detour to your right to Progetto Mortanaha, which is an impressive local NGO, and it runs a restaurant, a guest house, a handicraft centre, woodwork, and even a dentistry centre. It has a Brazilian influence and trains local youth in art and culinary services, and it's a great place to get some lunch. Now, before you get to Aileu town from Dili, you can turn to your right and you can head over to Saloy Crack. The main road through Aileu and Ainaro is sealed and is a reasonably decent road. When you head off towards Saloy, the road is definitely not of the same standard, and you can actually continue from Saloy through to Gleno and Amira, and that is a bad road. I've driven that on my motorbike and that was quite a challenge. But Saloy Crack is a beautiful place, home to a water lily filled lagoon, and it's surrounded by atmospheric rice fields. It is a very beautiful place to visit. You can have, on a clear day, views of Mount Ramalau. There are camping opportunities, there's some eco lodging, there's quite a lot to do around Saloy Crack, and so that is definitely worth. Overnighter from Dili, you can go there as a day trip, or if you're going up into Aileu, I definitely recommend spending some time there. Apart from the detour to Saloy, there's basically one road through Aileu, so if you just keep going up through that, you'll go through Aileu town, you get some beautiful scenery, some nice rice fields, and then you'll come into Ainaro, and that's home to some of the most dramatic scenery in the country, including Mount Ramalau, which is shared with the municipality of Amira next door, but most people access it from the Ainaro side. It's also home to the Dokamali waterfall, which is probably the most impressive in the country. Now, the main town in Ainaro is Mubisi, which is a popular by Timor standards, it's still pretty quiet, tourist destination. So Mubisi is a decent sized town, about 1,500 metres above sea level. It's definitely cooler up there than it is in Dili. It's quite nice to escape the heat, although it can be quite a lot wetter. It's a really great place to relax and enjoy the mountain air, or go for mountain biking or hiking. Now, when I visited in late 2024, the Posada do Mubisi was closed, but it is being renovated, and so hopefully it'll open at some point in the near future. And even if it isn't open, the site is worth visiting. This was a mountain retreat built for the Portuguese governor, and it was subsequently turned into a hotel. It's got very nice landscaping and spectacular views of the landscape, so very worthwhile taking a quick visit to explore. In Mubisi, there's the sizable Church of St. Matthew, which you can't really miss, and that's worth a visit. And then on Thursdays and Sundays, large local markets are held in Mubisi, which attract people from across the region. Heading through Mubisi, a few kilometres down the road, is quite a beautiful waterfall, the Usalalabiti waterfall, which has quite a deep pool. It's about a 20 or 30 minute walk from the road, but there's quite a range of paths that's very easy to get lost, so it's best to get a local guide from the local Hamatic cooperative, and they also offer some basic accommodation and can provide other tours, including of coffee. Heading further along the road from Mubisi, Mount Rabilau, not Ramulau, Rabilau, is a prominent peak close to the town, and that's been developed for tourism over the last kind of 10-15 years with the training of locals. And about 3 years ago, they started building some camping facilities. It costs a couple of dollars to enter, but if you go to top, there's a Catholic shrine, a pilgrimage site at the top with a statue of the Lady Mary and incredible views. When I visited last in late 2024, they were building a new road which will make access a lot easier. Generally every October they hold the Rabalau Festival, which has local cultural events and music, and it's a pretty popular place for Timorese in particular to visit. They're heading on from Mubisi to one of my favourite places in Timor-Leste, which is Hatopaliko. This is the highest village in the country, which lies around 1,950 metres above sea level. It's the base for hiking to the summit of Mount Ramalau, but there's also quite a lot to do in the village itself. A lot of people just come and do the Ramalau summit and then head away, but I would definitely recommend spending a couple of hours to walk around town. There's a very large and strikingly blue church, which was inaugurated in October 2022. Like with Mubisi, the Portuguese colonial administrator built quite a nice place in a prime location in the centre of Hatopaliko. Opposite it, they hold local markets on Wednesdays and Saturdays. On the hillside above, there's a large white tomb to an important local clergyman. And then going along the valley, there's a beautifully located cemetery on the hillside. And there's quite a lot of traditional Timorese thatch buildings in the village, including a number of Umalulik sacred houses. And there's lots of day walks as well around Hatopaliko. So it's a great place to spend some time. But say the main reason for most people visiting is to hike up Mount Ramalau, which I've talked a bit about in my Hiking in Timor-Leste podcast. Heading on further in through Ainaro, Dokamali waterfall, as I mentioned, is probably the most incredible waterfall in Timor-Leste. although it's not the easiest place to reach in Timor. So if you continue along the road from Mabisi for about 45 minutes south, and then you pull over from the road, there's a 1.5 kilometre path, which is quite steep, which goes up to the waterfall and back, so you need to allow probably at least an hour. The path is generally decent with a number of steps, but closer to the falls, care does need to be taken as it can be very slippery. An enterprising local has built a bamboo bridge to access the waterfall, for which it's $2 for Malay or foreigners to visit, so you have to pay to get across the bridge, and you get up and close with this incredible waterfall. And the final spot heading further into Ainaro is actually Ainaro town, which is quite different to Mabisi and Hautapalico, as it's much lower elevation, based in a lush river valley. It's one of the largest towns in Timor and therefore has a large church, and there's also a number of memorials and other things in town to see. But it's not really a major tourist site, but I guess if you're heading down to the south coast, it's worth stopping in Ainaro town and having a look around. So hopefully that's given you a bit of a flavour for some of the things you can see and do in Aileu and Ainaro. Thank you so much for listening to Exploring Timor-Leste. If you've enjoyed today's episode, please consider leaving a rating or a review. It really helps more people discover the show. If you have any questions or feedback, I'd love to hear from you. Drop me an email at exploringtimorleste@gmail.com. Until next time, obrigado ho adeus.